Roger, thanks for dropping by. Tulumnias. Sure you got enough there, Butch? It was a little bit of a fad for a while, and I did buy quite a few as like sets from the same place because the postage was minimal. I won't say I've got too many, because in my book when they're blooming you can't have too many, but there is a downside that we have to accept. If you use organic media like sphagnum moss, it doesn't last forever. And you'd think that because it's just moss, it doesn't actually matter when it gets old, but actually it does. Several of my dendrobiums weren't doing as well this year, and I looked at my records and I thought, they've actually been on that mount a hell of a long time, and the moss has never been changed. Now, moss gets algae on it, that's why it's green. I mean, I'll pick on that one. Let's take the ties off and I can probably show it better then. Now, this is where I need to go very careful, because if I start taking loads of plants off of their mounts, they're going to get separated from their tags. And when they're not in bloom, trying to sort out which one's which is not possible, which is why a couple of mine haven't got tags, because I did just that. I mounted several at the same time and put their tags to one side, and then when I'd mounted them I thought, I don't know which one's which now. But I just want to get the tie off, because this one has got some attached roots, but it's also producing new ones, and I think it will lift off. Yes, it will. You can hear a little bit of tearing. Yes, some roots are lost. But if I don't do something, I'm going to lose the plant, which is far more serious. Right, now we can see the moss. Underneath, it's still very similar to its original colour, but on the surface it's green. Well, I've heard people say it's zombie moss and it's coming back to life. Well, actually no, it's not. What's actually happening is it's getting covered in algae, which helps the breaking down process. It makes it worse, even though it might look a little attractive. But you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to tease out the old moss, taking care not to damage any, on this one, new roots. On some of these I don't think there will be any new roots yet. But my idea is to stimulate new growth, new root growth, by having a new media. See, now that one's not too bad. Some of these old roots will still be okay, some won't. I'll just trim the ends off of the older roots, taking care that there are some new ones coming out in places. Now that's not a bad plant, and it's only just got some very, very slight signs of desiccation, but not much. So this plant is managing to hydrate itself. And it's reasonably obvious that yes, it can, because it's got some new root growth and some of the old roots are still viable. So that's a safe plant. Yeah, it's got a new growth here, it's got another new growth coming there, and what looks like a new growth that started and then didn't do so well. Well, hopefully getting the old moss out from underneath in it and getting some new moss will stimulate that into growth. But if not, I've still got two. But if you take, that wasn't a bad growth. If you take this one, it actually lost some of its leaf tips and effectively stopped growing. So something is not right. Now I will take the opportunity, you know me with sheaths, and I do know that scale really got at my Tulumnias badly, so I will try and get as much of the sheaths off as I can. These were watered not that long ago, so the sheaths are actually moist, and they come off a hell of a lot easier when they're moist than when they're brown and crispy. But yeah, I will try and get as much of the sheaths off as I go along. Now I'm not going to film doing every single one, because they might not even all get the same treatment. See, now that fan has had it. The base of that fan has gone. There's no point in leaving that on the plant, no point at all. That's all right. I wanted to see a rhizome, as I know somebody, I'm blowed if I can remember who, it might have been Anna Maria, actually said that she got Fusarium in a Tolumnia, whereas I thought these were the type of plants that were virtually immune. But obviously not. You know, somebody who knows a fair bit about that particular problem, if they've said one of their Tolumnias has got it, I'll believe it. But mine got treated whether they had it or not. You know, when I did my fungicide spray, I did everything on the grounds that while I've got the sprayer out, you know, let's err on the side of caution and go for it. So I did the lot. Now that plant will recover nicely. That will be fine. And let's not get it away from its tag. I think the easiest thing I can do is line them up here with their tag and then deal with them one at a time. I want to do a bad one. There's a bad one. Couldn't get much flipping worse. No, actually, it's got new growth on it. There's no sign of any new roots. Look, see, there's a new growth that's failed. It's just desiccated. It's got no roots growing under it. You know, this growth was extending along here and actually produced that, which has just had it. But looking at the volume of sheaths in this area, I suspect that's where the scale got at that one. But it's got one at the back that is capable of recovering the plant. It's going to be a while before it blooms again. But as we know, Tolumnias bloom at a young age. Now I checked my records. I bought all of my Tolumnias over a period of time in 2015. That's quite a long time ago in the life of sphagnum moss. So well, that one's actually bloomed for me. I remember filming that one. Jarrack Flyer Pink Bush. It's actually Pink Brush, I think, and the tag's wrong. But let's have a look at this one. I doubt if this one's going to hang on very, very well. No, it's not. See, failed fan there, failing fan there, failed fan there. In fact, that whole part of the plant has failed. It's no point in keeping that bit, no point at all. I'll use my scissors. I haven't sterilised them yet. I'm just using these things for the ties. But yeah, that bit needs coming off. There's no point trying to keep that, and we'll keep that bit. But again, you know, the moss has gone. So any new roots that come out are not going to be happy in a moss that's just not right. I can see one good root in there at the moment. One, singular. Yeah, I've got a feeling even that part of the plant, yeah, I'm just going to keep that part of the plant. Okay, so you get the general idea. I will use the tap to get the worst of the moss out. That will also give the roots a damn good hydration now, while I've got them in my hand, and then they can go in some new moss and get remounted. Quite honestly, I'd like to try something different. If I had some of those little tiny plastic open baskets, you know, I might try a couple with like just 3 or 4 big pieces of bark, but they're difficult to get to stay in there, whereas with a mount you can strap them on. So that's probably, I'm just going to remount them, I think. I'm making these decisions as I go along based on each individual plant. And they might get something slightly different, like this one. This one's extending quite nicely, and it's got a new growth. This growth is in bloom, yeah, the previous one bloomed. The top part of the plant, where it's split, has pushed up a nice new growth and is now pushing up another one. And this plant isn't desiccated. This bit is. See what I mean? Look. Don't even think that's attached. The base of that plant's just gone. That'll be the scale, just chewed it off. And that bit can go. But this one's actually got a flower spike on at the moment, so I need to take care with that. So I'm just trying to work out where my lens is. So that's going to bloom again. That's a branch off of the original spike, which I will take care of, because what I'm going to do to this shouldn't stop those blooms opening. Well, that's my theory. So, like, here's a bad one. This is what desiccated leaves look like. See all the creases? They should be fat and plump, not like that. This one's going to be a big deal. Why? It's got no sign of new roots, but it has got new fans. Where are the roots? There. Are they going to come off? Are they hell? So I'm going to lose that root system around the back of the plant. Just have to put up with it. It can't stay there. It will die. It's dying now. I'm going to try and save it. If we look at that one looks pretty good, but close look. See the desiccation starting? It's not hydrating properly, but it has got good new growths on it, and it's just started new roots growing. So it's, you know, that's going to be a good one. That'll be fine. Ones that probably won't make it, that may be too far gone. Every single leaf is badly desiccated, no sign of new growths and no sign of roots and no sign of a tag. And the two that haven't got tags, that got muddled up, were the first two I ever got. They were not good plants to start with, but they did look better than that. So I don't think that one's worth keeping. I think that one has ceased to be. No sign of any growth and no roots, no viable roots. So they're not all going to make it. Trouble is, I won't know which one to cross off my list, will I? It's got no tag. And I think there's two like that. I think there's two with no tag. Yeah, that's the other one. So you might look at that one and think, is that one worth keeping? Well, yes, it is. It's not badly desiccated at all. It's got two new growths and it's just pushing out some new roots. This was always a small plant. Yeah, but that's the other one with no tag. So that's the one that goes with that one, and I don't know which one to cross off my list because I'm only keeping one of those. But that little one will be okay. That one will be fine. This one is going to be a right pain, but if I don't do something, it's going to go. The leaves are desiccating. It's not hydrating properly, but it's got a new growth back here. Got another little one there, but you see the plant extended, the latest extension has just gone. It's just rotted, and the new roots it started to push out stopped growing. So I need to do something with it. This one is going to be bad because quite a few of the roots around the back and a hell of a lot of them are attached. I'm going to lose those, but if I don't do anything I'll lose the plant. So I'll just have to start it again. That's a good one. Ornamental pear. So yeah, I'll just go through them one at a time. Where's my single fan one? See this one? This one was looking okay until very recently. It's just started to desiccate now and suddenly it's going bad. But it's got a new growth coming. It has no new roots on it at all. That's called fantastic. Well, it's far from fantastic at the moment. So you can see my predicament. Doing nothing, I'm going to lose plants. Might not lose all of them, but I will lose some. So by doing something, hopefully I save them. Okay, as I say, I'm not filming the flipping lot because I really want to get on with this. How many have we got here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. There's 13 to do, and I want to do them all. I don't want to make this a double event. It's all going to get done now, so I won't be filming all of it. I'll be cracking on off camera, but I'll come back and we'll revisit the plants later. But yeah, I need to get on. I'll be back in a bit. I don't know how close I can get, but most of the plants I've just dealt with and taken the sheaths off were okay. This one isn't. Look, it's absolutely smothered in scale at the base of that. Yeah? So they're still on a few of the plants. That'll explain a lot. But as I said, I'll just take all the sheaths off that I can get off. See, I mean, that's a nice strong growth there, and there's no scale at the base of that sheath. Yeah? This one's starting to desiccate. Are there scale at the base of the sheath? Yes. Sheaths came off there, look. You can see the scale. You can see the damage it's doing. It's the main culprit. I was worried that it might be something. Look, they're right in there at the base. I don't know how much of this you're getting, but look at them. Yeah, I mean, I'll lighten this video up before I publish it, so hopefully they show up. But yeah, that's a bad one. But it's a good plant, so I can clean that scale off. The hydrogen peroxide should take care of that. And it'll have a precautionary spray at some point as well. See, I haven't had many bugs lately, so the old systemic pesticide really hasn't been used for some considerable time. You know, you only got to get a couple that survive and hide, and then the numbers increase when you're not looking. See, there's an adult one's managed to make it to the top of that leaf. So all I can do is give them a good clean up and start them again in some fresh moss. But that one's got good new roots. That one's not too bad at all. He'll make it. But some of these older fans that have been damaged are probably going to do more harm than good by leaving them on, because they're already starting to rot. And look at the scale in the between the leaves. This is where they get. Oh, let's get that one off, because it's coming off anyway, and it would have been taken off with the scissors, but then I can split the two leaves. See, they're absolutely infested on that little growth. And that's why it was failing. They just get in there. Anyway, they're going to get some treatment and some fresh moss, and hopefully we'll start them again without the damage at the base of the fans. And any fans that are showing signs that they've been infected and are already suffering, I'm just going to take off. Better off than left on. Right, we're getting there, only got a couple more to do. Double kill. Done the whole plant in hydrogen peroxide, all the root system, like I normally do when I'm repotting or remounting, and that allegedly kills things off. What it definitely seems to sort out is things like mold spores and algae spores, things like that. But I've also heard from some people that it doesn't totally do the job. And if you want to totally do the job, soak the plant in alcohol. Well, I'm doing both. So while the plant's dry, they get a spray in the hydrogen peroxide, because like I've said before, if your plant's wet, when you spray a 3% solution onto a wet surface, you're diluting it. So it's no longer 3%. And if, you know, that's about as, you know, I've known some people use 5%, which is iffy to say the least. 3%'s okay. It seems to do the job. You know, used around the world by many people as recommended. But if you dilute it, it's not 3%. It could go down to 2 or even less, because everything's soaking wet and covered in water. So dry plant, 3%. Leave that for a while, yeah? And then what I do as a precaution is rinse the whole plant off. And then at that stage, they're getting a soak in alcohol, and then they'll be left to dry. Because the way the alcohol works on bugs and things is it dehydrates them, but to do that it has to evaporate. So yeah, this is going to be a long process. I've got a lot of plants to do, and each one has got to be done individually. I've just had to scrub all the mounts under the hot tap, get all the loose debris off, old roots and everything like that, bits of old moss. That's quite a long job. Now each one of those has now got to be sterilised properly. So, you know, I don't know how many kettlefuls of boiling water that's going to take, but this is a long process. But hopefully it's a one-off, and it will then last a nice long time. Okay, it wasn't that time when I started, but it flipping well is now. That was tedious, to say the least, but there's an air of enjoyment about it. I started with 13, we now have 9. 2 of them I knew I was going to throw away straight away just by looking at them initially. I thought they're too far gone, no new growths, no signs of roots, plant totally desiccated. It's all but dead. These are cheap little plants, easily replaced, none have sentimental value, none were presents, they were all picked up as and when, and losing a few I don't mind to retain the better ones. So although there's only 9 now, Tolumnia corona, that came from Schwerter. That was a weak plant, tedious when I got it. Big Bang, that's another one that's gone. That was also from Schwerter. If you remember a while back, that one tried to put a spike out and aborted it. All the buds blasted. There was no strength in that plant. So that one's gone. And I'm not quite sure what's happened here, because I definitely started with 13 and 2 of them didn't have tags. Well, one of the non-tag one, although it's tiny, it's got new roots. So I can recover that little one, but I don't know what it's called. And somehow or other I've lost one, because everything that's left has got a tag except that one. So I don't quite know what's happened here. In addition to that, 2 had Fusarium. So thank you, Anna Maria, or I wouldn't have even bothered checking these sorts of plants. Guess what? They both came from the same place. They were both bought at the same time, at the same venue, at the RHS show a couple of years ago. Can't blame the supplier after all this amount of time. So we'll just have to call it a coincidence that they both came from the same place and they're both infected. But I've got plants that have been infected that with treatment have recovered. And believe it or not, the 2 that are infected are 2 of my strongest plants, one of which has got a flower spike on. So having taken the old parts of the plant off, I've got new growths, I've got new roots with green tips. I'm happy that the treatment that's already had has worked. Remember what we say about Fusarium. If you've got a coloured ring in the rhizome, it doesn't matter what treatment you supply to that plant, that will never get better. The infected part is infected. It won't go away. All the treatments can do is stop it spreading. And the fact that we've got healthy new growths with nice green root tips, I suspect the treatment has worked. Okay, so that's Tolumnia Peach. And the other one that had signs in the older part of the plant, again, new root tips and new growths. Okay, it did go into 2 parts, but I was expecting that. They've both got new root tips, and that's Oriental Pear. If you want to do your homework, you can go back in my videos, or depending on how good your memory is, and you'll find out where I got them. But I'm not going to say, because it's not a new plant, just supplied to me. Yeah, so it would not be fair, even though I've had an issue with that lot before. Different thing altogether. Anyway, we have 9 plants that I'm happy will recover and will do well. And I've solved the problem of breaking down moss. They're not going to have any. Simple as that. Puts an overhead on me, because obviously these used to get watered like most of my other mounts, you know, and hold them above my doodah, my bowl, and pour water over them, and the moss soaked up some and the bark got wet and some of the plant got wet, and that's how I've always watered the Tolumnias, and it sort of worked. But if I don't want to go through this again, they need to go bare rooted on their mounts. Now, just pouring water over them totally bare rooted is probably not going to be good enough. So I'm giving myself a workload, because I think I'm probably going to have to dunk them. I'm probably going to have to stand them in their water and or their feed and let them soak for a short while. But because when I water I do quite a bit at once, they can be doing that while I'm getting on with other things. The same as my Vandas in the bucket. They certainly can't go in the bucket where the Vandas are, because the feed level's far too high. I feed my Vandas quite heavily. Certainly at this time of year anyway. They're putting up spikes and new growths and stuff, you know, they need food. But these don't need a lot of food. These, in the wild, these live on little twigs. Some, do actually live in shadier areas. Some take full sun. But when you're into hybrids, you can't tell. But these little roots, they thread their way under little twigs and things like that. You very rarely find a Tolumnia growing in anything. It grows on things, and it's mainly little twigs and small branches. Sometimes low down in scrub where they get a bit of shade, and sometimes right on the top of the little tiny bush, sat right in full sun. So they're strange little plants. They're adapted to take their moisture in fast. Most of the moisture they get is the morning dew point. You know, this business of when you've got very high humidity in warm air. These come from the Caribbean islands, you know, pretty warm there. People pay a fortune to go on holiday to places like that because it's warm. But they've got constant moist air off the sea. So they've got high humidity. That's the environment they live in. And overnight, yeah, on a clear night, it cools down to a degree. And as it cools down, the humidity level rises to such a point where it forms a dew, normally just before dawn or around dawn. And at that point, things have got water dripping off of them. And that's how they get most of their moisture when it doesn't rain. And they're adapted to take that moisture in pretty quick. So, yeah, I'm going to mount them bare. And they'll get dunked for a while. Okay, just so as you get the general idea, that's one of the double ones. That's the Tulumnia Peach, and I've put a tie in between the large growth, the one that's currently got the spike on, and the new growth. That will hold the base of the plant without touching any of the new roots. And then I've gone round the base of the plant and pushed some of the roots that already exist, some with growing tips, against the bark, so they're touching it. So the next bit of growth they do will probably attach. And then this one, again, I've had to go around the base of the plant and it is touching the leaves, but the new growth's here, coming up through there. Yeah, that's going to push roots out at the back of the plant straight onto the bark. So it's not just random, there is a bit of thought that goes into how I tie them on, depending on where the roots currently are and where the next lot are expected to be. Yeah, and then I put a tie round there just to hold those roots against the bark. So that's the general idea, not forgetting the tag, especially when you've got so many plants all on the go at once. So that's the sort of idea that I'll be doing with all of them. And as I said, to water these now, they will probably have to be dunked for a while, at least until they develop better root systems attached to the bark. So that's one done. Okay, last one. I thought I'd film this one because this is a double one. This is two pieces of the same plant. And I've got an odd shaped mount basically, but it's a lovely gnarly one. I love this mount, which is why I'm reusing it and not getting a new one. But first thought, this is the larger part of the plant. Yeah, it's got a good growth here, which I think might bloom. It's also got a new growth coming out there. Now, in theory, new growth should point outwards from the plant. But if I do that, if I point that outwards from the plant, I've got the oldest part of the plant at the front. And that's the bit that will eventually die back. So I want that at the back. So that's got to go like that. And that's the larger part. So that needs to go lower, yeah, to be in proportion. Now this other part, the oldest part's back here. The new growth with its new roots is here. That's the bit that needs to grow away from the mount. So that being a smaller part needs to go a bit higher. So the goal is to get it something like that. I say something like that because I'm getting tired. This is the last one. 9 of 9 as opposed to 7 of 9. Most of you don't know what I'm on about. Right, nice long length because I've got 2 to tie on, and I really despise running out. I'd rather waste some. It's dirt cheap fishing line, dirt cheap. Why leave yourself short? So the loop, I'm going to do this because I know somebody will ask, how do you tie your knots? Right, that side over the top, yeah? So I've now got a cross. The loose end comes round, goes up through the hole and down through the new loop that you've just made by doing that. Yeah? Grab hold of the end, put your finger in the loop and pull. See the knot? That knot will now pull tight. Only I'm not going to let it pull tight because I haven't got much of an end here and I need a bit more. So I'm just going to let it loosen. otherwise I have nothing to tie with. There we go. That is now a slip knot. If I pull it, yeah, cut me blood circulation off. So that's how I start, with a slip knot. You can just tie a knot if you want, but that's how I like to start. Now this part of the plant is going to tuck in there in that little groove, and all these little roots hopefully will get down in all these crevices. By rights I should put a loop round the back of the plant. In fact I will. Now to get a loop round the back of the plant, the easiest way is to put the loop in the place you want it before you put it on your mount. I know that might sound back to front, but trust me, it works. So I've now got my loop in the right place on the plant. Yeah? Now I can put my plant where I want it and just bring the loop, hang on, I've got some roots caught up. Bring the loop round the mount. Yeah, always make sure your loopy knot bit is at the back. That's quite important, because that's where you want all your knots to be, out of sight, round the back. And then as you can see, as I pull, it slides. And it's best to get your knot somewhere in the middle, reasonably tight. Yeah? Now that's not holding the plant firmly yet, so I know I've got to go round at least once more, like that. And now I'm going to stop, because that plant's reasonably firm now. Now I need to get the other one in there and remember where the hell I said I was going to put it. Now this is fiddly, because I also need to tie this one through the back. See, the oldest part of the plant serves a purpose. It's a place to tie where if you garrot the plant a little bit, it's not the end of the world, because it's the oldest part. And I want that plant about there. So that loop is now holding that part of the plant. Yeah? Now we can deal with the base of the plant with the next loop. Then we can deal with some of the roots, because there's quite a lot of roots on this one. They're not all alive, but Tolumnia roots can branch. So I'm pulling quite a lot of them in nice and tight on that gnarly bit. Now my tie is now down the bottom of the mount, and I know that when I put the first loop round, it's right at the top. So I need to go back up a bit with a couple of more turns just to get this near the top of the mount. And then when I turn it over, yeah, now this is the bit that a lot of people don't get. Where I made a slip knot and put my first loop round, I've got a V. This is the V I'm on about. That's my tie point. Over the years that's just worked well for me. So now with this huge big long end I've got, which I don't need, and quite honestly, as it's the last piece, I can cut that off and get it out of the way rather than save it. Now this end, this long end, goes through that V. Yeah? And it gives you a tie point. No, your fingers are getting clumsy. It's either more wine or less wine, I'm not quite sure which. But take that end through the V and pull it. And as you can see, it now has a point to pull against that you established when you first put your loop round. And because I was in a hurry, I've got a really tiny short end this time, but there's enough to tie. Right over left. Come on, right over left. Butterfingers. Yep. And then left over right. That's called a reef knot, or it is in the UK. Go back to your Boy Scout days if you ever joined them. And it's a knot that bites and has a tendency not to slip. Right, tag. What I try and do is thread it so that it can't wobble around. In fact, I'll go under that one and over that one. Yeah? And then the long end, in this case, which is not very long, can go through the hole. This is the bit where I usually start cussing because it won't go through. There we go. And that's the tag reasonably secure. I'll tuck that up in a minute. And with my tiny little end that I've got left, again, right over left, There really is hardly anything left to tie with. That's just planning ahead. Yeah, and then left over right, and that's the tag secure. And then all loose ends, snip them off and make sure you dispose of your loose ends of fishing line safely. Because I got pussycats, and pussycats love to play with dangly things, and playing with fishing line and ending up getting it in their mouth is not the best of ideas. So there we go, that's both plants, new growths on the outside, yeah, new roots pushing down, existing roots strapped on. These have a branching habit, so in theory any of these roots that decide to shoot out and branch can get straight onto the mount. The oldest part of the plant is at the back, and the reason for that is that's not going to grow anymore. The new growths on Tolumnias progress along a rhizome. They very rarely shoot out behind the latest growth. They do sometimes, the vigorous ones. But yeah, so my new growth on this side can push out there, new roots going down, and my new growth here, and I think possibly even a second one coming up through the middle there, in the middle of the mount. Yeah? So that's how I mount a bare rooted orchid. The only difference if I had moss on this mount was trying to hold the flipping moss in place, which is where your third hand comes in. You know, all those that have got a third hand, well, good on you. I haven't. So it usually involves some language. So that's the last one. I'll take the camera off the tripod because I've laid all these out on the dining room table and we'll go and have a look. And I feel a lot more comfortable about my Tolumnias now. So let's take the camera down and go in there. Okay, here we are then. That's that lot done. Now I don't know how long this video actually is, but the lapse time, the actual time it's taken me, is about 2 hours. But don't forget that involved cleaning up the mounts, giving them a scrub with my toothbrush, pouring boiling water over them to sterilise them. You know, actually doing the hydrogen peroxide on each plant and then rinsing that off, giving them a soak in the rubbing alcohol. My brain's gone. You know, and then doing each individual mount. Plus tidying up the plants, taking off the sheaths, getting rid of the dead bits, deciding which bits to keep, deciding which plants to discard. So, you know, quite a long task in one go. Actually, I've had a couple of breaks. That's why the wine glass went down a bit and suddenly looked full again. Yeah, it got topped up. But these are looking better already. You know, I mean, you know, that's still a little bit desiccated, but these are going to pull through. I'm happy that the ones I've kept are going to make it, and any that don't can go under the flipping hedge. You know, this is their chance now to really get a hold, bare rooted, not have to worry about breaking down moss again. To me it makes sense, and given the way these grow in the wild, this is not an alien environment for them. They're used to having their roots bare and grabbing hold of whatever they can find. Well, what they can find on a mount is pretty sound stuff, not tiny little twigs and branching out into thin air and all stuff like that. So they've got every chance to recover now. And the two that are now iffy plants, even though I think they're on the road to recovery, will get a spray when I get a chance. Just as a precaution, that's all it is. Better be safe than sorry. And the watering programme for these now will involve a dunk to make sure they're well hydrated while they recover from their upheaval, shall we say. But they weren't comfortable where they were. I mean, I showed enough of the plants at the beginning, the desiccation on the leaves, you know, the lack of new growths in places, lack of new roots in places. They weren't happy. They'd been on those mounts in that moss too long. And while I'm at it, there's a couple of dendrobiums that spring into mind that are in exactly the same boat. The ones I've had the longest that were mounted straight away have probably been there too long. So I'm going to have to backtrack now and have a look round my notes, find out what's been on a mount, for how long, and have a good look at it. You know, I mean, in some cases you can just, you know, scrape out the old moss with a, you know, with a bit of fork or something like that, and bare root it, or perhaps add some new moss, but get rid of the old moss first, obviously. But I'll give you progress updates on these because it's a set, and it's now a set of 9, whereas it was a set of whatever I said earlier, 13, I think. And we'll see how they go. But I think they're going to pull on better now. That's my theory, and we shall see. Thanks for dropping by, and if this ends up being a long one, well, tough. Trying to do that many plants in one go is not a 10-minute job. Yeah, see you next time. Tolumnia's on the go, we hope. Bye for now.